So we have a really interesting video here between Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson. They talk about a lot of things over 2 hours, but I wanted to look at the end of this video at their conversation on toxic feminism. I think there's some good stuff here, and I'd like to make a few comments on what Nick says to Tucker, sort of as the younger man who is speaking to the older man, the older generation. Let's listen in. In the beginning here, he's talking about pornography, how porn is destroying men, which is also a very good and important conversation, one that Tucker himself even acknowledges he has known he needed to have, but has been kind of embarrassed to have. And I think that's a huge problem with the older generation and with the younger who feel guilty, who know that porn is a problem. We're embarrassed to talk about it. We're ashamed of this issue, but it is destroying men, as Nick says. I think Nick is 100% true. Maybe a lot more men in his generation than in Tucker's, but it is destroying men. So I'm really glad they had that conversation. But what I wanted to look at here is what happens when they get into toxic feminism. So let's listen in.
So much, you kind of achieve an identity with the woman in like a weird, sick way. You almost identify with the woman. And so there's weird things that happen when you're watching that and having such strong emotional and sexual experiences with it.
That's fascinating. I've sensed for a long time, having had a lot of young male employees mention porn as a problem. I mean, the big porn companies give visibility to foreign intel services on the back end. So that means people know what you're looking at. There's likely video and audio of you watching. So that, that's like such a deal killer for me. I'm not a huge expert on the topic, but I have always sensed this was a huge deal, but I've always been too embarrassed to do a show on it.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like you're describing something that's everywhere, that affects everybody, and that is, do you think it's related to the huge decline in actual sex and relationships and marriage, screwed up dating? All of this derives in part from porn, do you think?
I think it's a huge part of it. It's a huge factor. And it's even on the other side, too. It's become so destigmatized for women to actually participate in porn. People don't even recognize that OnlyFans is a whole separate category. It's an innovation in the realm of pornography, because you have what everyone knows as porn, which is like videos of porn stars, like dedicated career sex workers having sex in a relatively controlled environment or something like that. But then you get OnlyFans, which is like Patreon for nudes or sex. And basically, there's now a very large subculture, much larger than people want to admit, of women who the moment they turn 18, that is what they do, is they make an OnlyFans account and they become an amateur porn star. And it is completely casual, because you could say that maybe 10 years ago, even at the heyday of internet porn, to be in porn, you got to be a porn star. That's your life and that's your career and that's who you are. And it's very shameful. With OnlyFans, it's like having a TikTok. It's like, here's my link tree. Here's my Instagram account. Here's my Facebook account. Here's my YouTube. And here's my OnlyFans.
Why would any of this be legal?
I think that, there's, like you indicated, maybe there's an intelligence benefit to that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a political benefit to that. I think that...
Well, why wouldn't you arrest the people who run something like that?
They should be. If you had a Christian government...
Or how about just a government that cares about its people? I mean...
I really think that's interesting right there. I think we see a distinction here between Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson. Nick Fuentes is comfortable saying a Christian government. Nick Fuentes is comfortable associating righteous morals with a Christian government without needing to be afraid of, coming off as bigoted or, racist towards anyone who's not Christian. He says a Christian government. And then what does Tucker say? He says, well, how about just a government that cares about its people? Tucker wants to back off of that, right? Tucker sees Nick Fuentes as an extremist. But what is the word that Nick Fuentes just used? He used the word Christian. He said, in a Christian government, we would arrest pornographers. And to that I say, yes, amen. In a Christian government, we would arrest pornographers. And then Tucker Carlson does the whole, which is kind of a liberal thing to do, actually. Well, just how about a government that cares about its people? Yeah, why do you need to not associate that with Christianity, Tucker? Aren't you a Christian? We want a Christian nation, right, Tucker? No, he wants an American nation. Saying Christian is a little bit too exclusive, right? And this is why Nick Fuentes is still, to this day, a Christian nationalist. He identifies Christianity and white people with heritage America, which is something that Tucker Carlson is a little bit afraid to do. Let's keep going.
Is Iran a bigger threat, or is OnlyFans? Iran's not turning my daughters to prostitution that I'm aware of.
Right.
Right? I mean, that seems like one of the worst things that could happen to any society.
Oh, absolutely.
So how big is the support for that? Like, if a candidate were to come out and say, we ought to arrest the guys who own MindGeek, which is the biggest, I think it's the biggest porn supplier in the world, or the guys who run OnlyFans, what would the reaction be among, I don't know, people under 50?
I think there would be broad support for that.
Really?
I do, actually, yes.
I hope someone will say that.
I don't agree with Nick Fuentes on this. I wish he was true. He was right. I wish that was true, but I don't believe it. I don't think there's broad support for banning pornography. I think on the left there is broad acceptance of porn. There is positivity towards sex workers. There is attempts to destigmatize pornography. And then on the right, you have a lot of people who are against pornography, but you have this libertarian streak in the right wing that's like, well, but we shouldn't use the government to enforce morality, right? You can't legislate morality. They're still stuck on that a lot in the right. So I think you're left with just a subsection of the right that would be willing to use the state to ban pornography. Christian nationalism is a big part of that, because Christians who are political, which I will just call Christian nationalism, they are okay with using the government to enforce God's law, to enforce God's morality. God says pornography is not all right. We should make it illegal. But I think that's still a very small subset of even Christians. And then within the right, I'd be surprised if you got 50% of the right. So I wish that Fuentes was correct here, but I don't think he is.
And I hope someone arrests them, like, right away.
Yeah, that was actually
seizes
one of
their assets and puts them in prison.
Seizes their bodies and puts them in jail. Yeah, I mean,
the owners of that, people who are, I mean, talk about human trafficking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I thought we were against human trafficking.
Yeah. Well,
so you think that young people, because you always think of young people as so liberal, but like, no, they wouldn't think that was crazy?
No, I think especially among young men, they know it's a problem. It's ruining their lives.
I think that's true. I think young men, especially kind of responsible right-wing young men, they know it's a problem. It is ruining their lives. But what percentage of your electorate are right-wing young men? I mean, it's growing. We're happy about that, but I still don't think that's broad support. I wish it was. As far as the right-wing young men that Nick speaks for, yes, there would be broad support for banning pornography among that cohort. But outside of that cohort, I don't think so, unfortunately. I wish it was the case.
And they know it.
So what are the other factors that prevent... I'm sorry I called you gay, by the way.
That's funny. Tucker called him gay on a previous podcast with Candace Owens, and he's laughing here. But this is an interesting section because Tucker almost acts like a father figure here, sort of trying to guide Nick Fuentes towards marriage. Right? That's why he begins this with, sorry, I called you gay, by the way, because he's trying to he never asked the question straight up front, but he's trying to get to the answer. Why are you not married? Why are you not interested in a woman? You're successful. You could be married right now. Why are you not married? But they make it more broad. They make it about society. So let's take a look.
But I'm always, I think I'm just too old or something. I'm like, why is anyone married? You tell me, why aren't people married?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's the women.
I love this answer, Nick. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being willing to speak clearly and saying the offensive but true thing, right? Tucker just called you gay, kind of, and said sorry, and then said, why isn't anybody married? He doesn't ask you why you're not married. He asks, why isn't anybody married? And Nick Fuentes gives the correct answer, which is, it's the women. I love it.
The women are extremely liberal. No one talks about that. Increasingly they do, especially after the last election. There's a 45-point difference between men and women. The men are extremely conservative, increasingly. The women are extremely liberal.
What are they liberal on? What issues? Like, what does that mean, liberal?
They're very feminist.
Like, actually?
Extremely feminist, yeah.
They don't believe that, do they?
I think they do.
What is Tucker doing here? I think Tucker kind of has sort of a part he's playing here. This is not his actual genuine reaction. He's not actually genuinely surprised that women are feminist. I think he's trying to play this part that's like, you should be married. Remember that. I think that's what Tucker's doing here. He thinks that Nick Fuentes should be married, and he thinks all of these excuses are kind of cope. They're cope for not getting married. I think that lens will make sense of Tucker's reactions in this part. But the answer is, of course, women are left-wing. But let's keep going.
Really?
Absolutely,
How can
yes.
you believe that?
I think
gender roles are a construct, that none of this is inborn?
Tucker, you've spent your life talking to these crazy people. You were just on a Turning Point USA college stage debating women who believe that. So you know that people believe that.
You'd have to be an idiot to think that.
They are idiots. Look at it. This is a funny face from Nick. It's kind of like, why are you saying this? What is it you're doing?
they like the idea of it.
And yeah, Nick actually gives a good answer. He says, yeah, maybe I get what you're saying, but they like it. It benefits them.
They like because of course I think all women naturally want strong men.
Of course, obviously.
They naturally want a Chad. They want like a tall, buff guy. But I think they like the idea of none of them want to work either. None of them actually want to work.
No, that's what I'm saying. Of course, right. It's obviously true. It's always been true. Work outside the home.
Now, listen, of course, Nick is kind of giving the devil his due here, and Tucker's correct about that, right? Women want strong men, and women want to not work, obviously, right? But what Nick Fuentes is going to say is that they are spoiled. They want it all. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be feminist and have a Chad husband and not work and be liberal and be whatever. Like, it's not actually wrong to say that you're right, they don't believe this stuff, but they also do believe this stuff. They like believing this stuff. It's the idea of a luxury belief, right? A luxury belief is a belief that you don't have to pay for. You're rich enough that you can believe it and not feel the consequences of your idiot belief.
Right.
They don't have enough work at home. There's a lot to do. But no, I completely agree. So that's why I question, like, they're feminists in what sense?
Yes. And, they like these vague appeals to equality. We want a chance to work and we want respect. And, ultimately, I think the whole political system is just based around women never being accountable for any of their choices. Ultimately, that seems to be that's what abortion is.
Yeah, of course.
Because 99% of abortions are elective. So they say it's an unplanned pregnancy. You had sex out of wedlock with someone you didn't intend to have kids with. So now we have to kill the kids in the womb. And, these no-fault divorce laws. These women get married to guys maybe they never intend to stay with. And then when they're out, they're done. And they want child support and they want half the stuff. And I think a lot of men are looking at women and they're very liberal. They're overweight. They have a very high estimation of themselves. I think that people call it hoflation.
Hoflation?
Yes, their sense of their own looks and sexual value is very inflated. And so a lot of people are looking at these like frumpy, obnoxious, loudmouth, liberal women who are also very promiscuous and saying this is not actually appealing at all. And I don't want to start a family with a person.
So what Nick just described is the reality on the ground for young men. For men in their 20s, this is what they're up against. That's the truth. Nick just kind of ran through some of the red pill narrative, but he also describes pretty accurately what men are up against, and that's why they're not getting married. And I think that's a pretty decent answer to this question.
Sounds awful.
Yeah, it is.
But if you believe in the patriarchy, as I fervently do, because it's just reality, we didn't choose the system. We were born into a system that is part of nature, can't get out of it. So if you believe that that's true, which it is, then you think that men should lead. And if it's going to be better, men should make it better.
This is so annoying from Tucker. I think Tucker is better than this. I think, again, he's trying to press Nick Fuentes as an individual. I think that's the lens here we should use to understand what Tucker is doing. Because he's trying to say to Nick, you're a leader, bro. You're a man. You are very successful. You could be married right now. Why are you not married? Because with Nick Fuentes, that's a reasonable question, right? He's not getting at that, but look at the look on his face right now, on Tucker Carlson's face. This is personal. This is more like, almost like I want to come out and say it like, are you gay, dude? Are you faggot? Because you're not married and there's some rumors about that stuff. He doesn't do it because he's professional, you know, but I think that's what he's getting at, because the argument is so bad, right? The argument is, well, don't you believe in the patriarchy? Shouldn't the man just stand up and change the system? But Nick Fuentes just ran through why you can't do that. It's the entire system. It's society, right? Society and the legal system and all of the education system and everything in the world is against you standing up and reinforcing your own patriarchy in your own house, or whatever it is, whatever Tucker thinks he's going to do. This is so often what we hear, especially from the church. And Nick Fuentes talks about that a little bit later. That's why people go to Andrew Tate, because the church are simps. The church are not helping men stand up. The church are often championing the women or going along with the society in a way that is not encouraging the patriarchy, right? So that's a terrible pushback from Tucker here. And you hate to see it, because Nick Fuentes just laid out something very important there. And I think Tucker maybe is honestly dealing with it. He did say, that sounds horrible. But sometimes it's just so horrible that a married man in his 50s can't really deal with it. And so the only real way out is to say, well, then the men should just man up and get married anyways. But they're talking about society here. I do think with Nick Fuentes, that might be a more genuine objection, because this man is successful, talented, wealthy, all that. He could get married. He could be married. There are women who go on his shows, his fangirls go on his shows and ask him to marry her in the super chats. You know, that happens all the time. So for him, it's a different question. But what Nick just raised is about society, because Tucker didn't ask Nick directly. Tucker asked about society. Why isn't anybody getting married anymore? And so it's a reasonable thing to respond with an answer about society, which is what Nick does. And that answer is that society is against them, Tucker. Society is against them. I saw a little video, I think it was a Instagram reel or YouTube short, of these people who kind of did a test, a little test. I believe it was real. You know, a lot of these seem scripted, but this seemed pretty real, where they had the same actors in the same restaurant playing out two different scenarios, one with a man, one with a woman, showing up and finding out that their boyfriend or girlfriend had cheated on them, was there with another woman or another man. And they loudly go, "How could you do this? How could you cheat on me? We were talking about getting married." And the cheater, who's playing the role of the cheater in this skit, always asks, "How did you find me?" And the wronged girlfriend or boyfriend says very loudly, so the whole restaurant can hear, "I tracked you on your phone." So at first is the woman. The woman comes in, she says, "How could you do this to me?" And the man is there with another woman. And the man says, "How did you find me?" And the woman says, "I tracked you on your phone." And the man's like, "That's a huge invasion of my privacy." And random women in the restaurant stand up and come to the aid of this woman who has tracked the man on his phone and say, "Oh, baby, come over here. Oh, I'm so sorry. I would have done the same thing as you." And then literally a random woman from the restaurant goes up to the man who is supposedly the cheater and says, "You may think she's crazy, but I would have done the same thing. And you are so wrong for cheating on her and leading her on and blah, blah, blah." And choose him out, right? Choose out the man who is cheating. But then they reverse the role. Same restaurant, a different day. the man comes in and finds the woman with another man, and he goes, "How could you do this to me?" And she says, "How did you find me?" And he says, "I tracked you on your phone." And the woman's like, "You tracked me on my phone? That's such an invasion of privacy." And random women from the restaurant stand up, but it's very different. Now they're offering legal advice to the woman. They're saying it's illegal for him to track you. You should report this. And then another woman comes and says, "I've already called 911." So random women in the restaurant called 911 on this man because he had tracked the woman with her phone. And when the roles were reversed, and in both cases, the man or the woman acted reasonable. They weren't like getting violent or anything. They were just acting like a offended lover, you know. It wasn't as disruptive as getting to be a threat of violence or anything like that. But when the woman did it, she had help. She did the same thing. She committed the same quote unquote crime, but random women step in to be on her side, to aid her, to chew out the guy for her. Right? But when it's reversed, they call the cops on that guy, right? And when the cops show up, they're going to enforce the law on that man. And this is just the feminization of society. The norms have shifted so in such an extreme way that there is a real double standard. There is a real double standard that men, especially young men who grew up in public schools, they know that's the case. They have lived it. They have seen over and over that women get to do things that men don't get to do. And when men cross the line with the women, they get punished harshly. They get canceled, they get their reputations destroyed, they get kicked out of polite society, and it is over for them. They are no longer welcome with the cool kids. And that's what it's like living in a female-dominated society. And I think people like Tucker really don't quite get that. They get that, but they don't feel it in the same way that a young person who has grown up does. And when you grow up with that, you don't really want to get married, right? Nick Fuentes says this a little bit later, but you can marry a good girl. You can find one of the good girls, Christian, whatever. But who knows what's going to happen in 10 years, 15 years. People change. And she will be on TikTok. She'll be talking to other girls. She will be influenced by the society in such a way that she could change her mind. She could become this toxic feminist kind of person, even if she is not that right now. And so there's a lot of men who are just going their own way. They're going the Andrew Tate way, which is just put women in their place, have a harem, be a pornographer, whatever. That seems to be the only way to retain your masculinity in this toxic dating environment. And if that's the world, then who the heck are you, Tucker Carlson, to say, well, don't you believe in patriarchy? Shouldn't the men just stand up? It's like, yeah, one guy against all of the entire world? Because it's not just your wife, right? It's all the women, random women in a restaurant. If they overhear your conversation, will stand up and unionize together. Women love to do this. They unionize together and gang up on the man. And there's a lot there, but I really like that Nick Fuentes is willing to say it's the women. It's the women. It's one of the best things he did on this podcast. I really like in the end, actually, the last thing after this, Tucker asks him, what does America's future look like? And Nick says, it's not looking good, but if I was Trump, I would go hard. I would destroy the other side. I would crush the other side. And that is an amazing answer. That is the right answer. That's what we're all hoping for, because there's no more politics as normal. And if Trump, while he has the power, crushes the other side, that is really the best chance we have of continuing to have some sort of renaissance or a golden age of America here, where we can claw back something like the country that we had just 20 or 30 years ago. So overall, great interview. I just wanted to take a quick look at some of this relationship stuff, the women question here. I've rarely seen it addressed as clearly as this on a mainstream podcast. It already has 3.2 million views after less than 3 hours. So this hopefully will continue to get that message out there that it is the women that are the problem. Of course, the men are enabling it, but this is not a healthy environment for marriage formation, and we have to do something different. This cannot continue. It has to stop.